Okay, so what is it that we want to talk about today? Our session is called People, the Real Fuel in the Energy Transition. And well, I, for myself, personally speaking, come from the technical corner as an engineer, and I've always seen a lot of interesting developments in technology and what you can do with it and all these kind of things. And sometimes it would happen that we forgot the application or the practical use or actually talking to the people they're supposed to use these things. And that's why I want to bring this a little bit up in this session and say, well, in the end, it's about the people. In the end, it's about the people changing and us all together changing and making something better. And today, I want to reflect that a little bit because we have invited people from different parts of the energy transition work, so to say, from a very high level, let's say program level, where we distribute fundings to, let's say, projects, to a mayor of a municipality who really has these things at hand and implements it and talks to the people and tries to push this through. So we will hear voices from all these people and in between. And before we start, I have a few, let's say, objectives for today that we should hopefully tackle so you can get more insights on that. So one thing is that I already described the real needs of citizens or consumers, especially the local actions that we have, for example, in a specific place or municipality. We want to identify also which stakeholder groups or stakeholders in particular might play a bigger role in the energy transition now or in the future, especially. And we want to identify maybe standards or initiatives that can help leverage and empower the people. So these are the few things that we're going to tackle. We can also talk about the high level approach, for example, what European Union or associated programs think about this and how they approach these things. So all these things we're going to hear. And before we start, so this was a little introduction. Before we start, we will hear a keynote from Professor Cecilia Katsev. She will give us the first keynote. Maybe you can jump back if it's possible, Katarina. Yes. And after that, we'll hear from Mina Kuvalainen, another input from the Bridge Working Group, where we analyzed or characterized stakeholder groups and stakeholders in particular. And when we wrap this up, these two inputs, then we'll have a panel discussion where we're going to open the panel, so to say, for more people and hopefully get a good discussion going. I will say more to that. We're there. Most important thing is to understand that we'll have two bigger inputs, and then the three ladies that are missing here that I'll shortly introduce later, they will get 99-second inputs. That's how we call them, just to say who they are, what to do, and give us maybe one or two slides to explain a little bit what is it that they are doing and what is it about. And before we start with the first input, I would like to ask the audience first where they're from. So we will try now to activate the poll if it's possible and see if you can see it. So you can follow the screen. So if you have a phone at hand, just please scan the QR code. I think that's the fastest way to participate. You can also just go into your browser and type in slido.com and then put in this code, or third option in the chat, we have a link. Thank you very much, Katarina, that you can follow and also apply. This is just a little, how can I say, insight of who we're talking to so we can address you maybe more properly. You can see here the things that you can answer. So commercial prosumers and private prosumers, I think that's very clear. Actors in distributed system would be, for example, also power plants or aggregators. And so find yourself, if you can, in these things. Probably if you are from a consultancy agency, let's say, or something like this, it would be also suppliers and supporters. I know it's a little bit vague how it's framed. So just find what is mostly common or most associated to you, what you do or who you represent today, and just put it in there so we know where you're from. And I see, okay, so we have a lot of people that are associated with the energy system or such tasks, but not necessarily as private people here. Also very interesting. Actors in distributed system would be DSOs, TSOs. So find yourself somewhere there. So we know academia, I would also put in suppliers and supporters. So if you associate yourself with this, please let us know. I think we have 12 votes. Maybe give it another 20, 30 seconds to see for those who have not voted yet. Use the chat, use the QR code, type in type in your link in your browser and find the survey. We'll also do 2 more little questions later on, but we'll show it on the screen, so don't worry about that. You could keep it open in the browser and on your phone, and then you can just participate faster. So maybe don't close it right away after you have participated right now. So I see still some small movement, but I think we have concluded. So very interesting. Almost everybody is a supporter supplier of, let's say, the energy system in the widest sense. Others, okay, maybe we can get back to that, what this could be. Maybe it's also included here. And we also have 1 or 2 private people here. Very interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Very insightful. So good also to know a little bit about you before we start. And with this, I would like to jump to the next point on the agenda, if it's possible. So here's the keynote. What are needs and expectations of citizens and consumers for the clean energy transition by Cecilia Katsev. The floor is yours. Let's try to do it in 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to you all. Very nice to talk to you. As Andrea said, I'm Cecilia Katsev, and I'm an associate professor in human-computer interaction at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. I'm going to talk about expectations of households in the clean energy transition. Especially, I will talk about a recent project that we just finished, which was called Stories from the Homes of the Smart Grid. So next slide, please. Just in case we will discuss what smart grids are, I can tell you about my own description. There's no established definition of smart grids that I know of. So I will not try to define it, but instead I will highlight a few key characteristics describing smart grids. So first of all, the smartness of smart grids consists in digital technology being used to collect, measure, and act upon data in the grid. And the environmental sustainability aspect of smart grids lies in their function to integrate renewable energy into the system, such as solar and wind power. And another sustainability aspect is the capacity of the grid to, I call this a sustainability aspect because if the capacity is insufficient, people won't be able to use electricity in the obvious way that we're used to. Access to electricity is actually one of the cornerstones of our welfare society. And we've been used to electricity always being present behind the 2 holes in the wall. But this is changing due to the intermittent delivery of renewable energy and also through the increasing congestion in the power grids. So this is where the next significant characteristic of smart grids enter the scene, and that's the flexibility, balancing the load in the power grids. So in the smart grid, the supply of electricity will fluctuate. So electricity consumption will need to adapt to the hours of the day when supply is high and steer away consumption from when the supply is low. And the fourth feature of smart grid is its major touch point to households, which is what I'm going to mainly focus on today. And that is that in addition to smart meters measuring electricity use with a very high resolution, there will also be technology in the homes that visualizes, automates, and controls the electricity use of people in the home. So although ecological sustainability is a basic driver to create a grid integrating renewable energy, it's also crucial that the development of the grid considers social sustainability. And ecological and social sustainability are possible to combine, and none of the aspects should be implemented at the cost of the other. So please, the next slide. And the next slide. Okay, so why focus on homes? Having said all this about smart grids, you may wonder why researchers in the field of behavior science and sustainable development see need to address the social dimension of smart grids. My research group targets the home, since this is a social unit including the interaction of households with the physical environment, such as the building itself and infrastructure and home technology, including smart home technology. So previous research points to some major challenges in this, and one challenge is that the energy sector still is quite technology driven. In the implementation of smart grids, other competencies are also needed to cater for the adjustment to the diversity of people's lived lives, their motivations and ambitions, and for them to become an integrated part of sustainable energy system. Another challenge is that there's an exaggerated optimism and expectations on smart meters as the silver bullet for changing people's behavior to, for instance, to become more flexible. But smart meters collect and deliver data. Services are designed to communicate the data to households. It's in the design of these services the potential lies. And the third challenge is that households are seen as an untapped source of demand flexibility. The concept of active users is often heard in discussions and seen in visions of the smart grid. But this concept is, to my mind, quite unclear, and it needs to be explored in relation to what people do in their homes and in relation to sustainable development. A final challenge I'd like to mention is the challenge of actually to take into account the social context. We know from previous research also that the new technology implemented in the workplace or in a home has a tendency also to change the context. So is this a desirable context or not? This is something to be aware of. Next slide, please. Yes, if you click, you can get all the no. Oh, yes, thanks. In the recently finished project, Smart Meters from the Home, we wanted to dive deeper into issues dealing with the role of private households in the smart grid and how they will be affected by this new socio-technical system of smart grids. And the project, thank you, the Energy Agency in Sweden, for providing the funding. In this project, we also cooperated with DSO EUSEW, who also owns the regional electricity network in Stockholm. The purpose of the project was to increase the understanding of how smart grid technology and services affect private households when implemented in the homes. We wanted to study how visions of stakeholders and actual practices in the homes correspond. So interviews and observations were made through analysis of policy documents, communication and interviews with stakeholders, and also interviews with households in their homes. Next slide, please. So now I'll say something about the stakeholder expectations, which we investigated through analyzing different policy reports and through interviewing different stakeholders. So please, the next slide. Could you change slides, please? Is there a problem changing slides?
Just a second. Katarina, can you say something maybe? I hope we had not lost Katarina. That would be very bad.
Okay, I could start talking about the next slide. The analysis of policy reports led by a PhD student here at KTH, it reveals a lot of interesting issues. And we were guided by an approach called WPR, it's an approach formulated by Carol Buckey in 2016. And that approach is an abbreviation of what is the problem represented to be? Thank you. That's the correct slide. And by identifying suggested solutions to a problem, it's possible to make inferences about the problem itself. So we analyzed these policy documents. We had 33 policy documents which were identified as interesting for our search because they contained a text about the role of households in the smart grid. And we looked for views of households in the smart grid and how they were represented in the problem, and how households were seen as part of the solution. So you see the connection between presenting a solution, and then we went backwards to see, so what's the problem if you have the solution? And some examples of reports were from the Swedish Smart Grid and Energy Markets Inspectorate. The Energy Agency was also part of this, and we have several government official reports. So next slide, please. So this is a summary of what we found in analyzing these reports. And what they mainly said is that households are part of the solution by being interested in their own energy data and being able to act upon it. Flexibility is a key word in this, and flexible electricity use is the central solution put forward. And the households would also play a role in accommodating household activities to optimal times during the day and night, and to allow automatic control of equipment in the house. For instance, the heat pump, the heat pump and electronic vehicle charging were put forward as the main equipment that was going to be automatically controlled. And they're also part of the solution by producing their own electricity and by being motivated by financial incentives. Next slide, please. And these were some instruments that were mentioned in the reports, how the households were to become flexible. And here we have dynamic pricing. We have the visualization of electricity use in the actual home. The automated home is a solution or an instrument, and appliances connected to the internet, like smart appliances, microproduction of electricity, and also the behavior itself to move behavior in order to balancing the load. So next slide, please. These are, I couldn't resist just showing some examples that were designed at my previous workplace, the Interactive Institute, where we designed the power aware cord, or colleagues to me designed the power aware cord and the energy aware clock. If I have time later, I may say something more about it, but there are alternative ways of visualizing electricity use, not using numbers. So next slide, please. This is the case study that we made within this project. I said that we did the analysis of policy reports from stakeholders and interview with stakeholders, and then we also made interviews with households in the pilot area where EUSEW implemented the second generation of smart meters. So the next slide, please. This is a picture of the smart meter, the second generation of smart meter, which was implemented. And this was actually the empirical core of our study. And that's the EUSEW's pilot rollout the summer of 2021. And they rolled out 4,000 new smart meters, or maybe they changed it to 2,000. I don't remember that at the moment. And this was done in the south of Stockholm. To provide households with data from the smart meters, EUSEW also provided a service visualizing electricity consumption data. These are some of the formulations you can see to the right that were used when when they launched the smart meter, or the first one is the quotation that's EUSEW used. The new smart meters will provide customers with a better insight into their electricity use. They will also be able to use electricity in a more climate-friendly and cost-efficient way. So as you can see, high hopes are put into the meter, as it is expected to provide households with knowledge, not only data. And the quote comes from the management of EUSEW. The meter has a lot of functions right now, not all of them being used at the moment or at the moment of implementation, but it's prepared for integrating micro-production of solar power and also for feedback service. And the function of automatic control is also prepared for. You also have the feedback service, which was implemented later, visualizing electricity. So please, the next slide, I'll tell you more about the
I had to
case
interrupt
study.
Cecilia. Unfortunately, just
Yeah.
have 1 minute, so
Okay.
I'll give you two
So
due
you
to
can
little
skip, you can skip this.
technical things, but let's do 2 minutes then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So okay. So you can skip this one and take the next slide. Just 1 minute left. And these are some of the questions that we focused on in doing the interviews with the households. What was the experience of their home, the implications of different type of households, and the implications of smart home technology, and what was the attitude to external control of power systems. So next slide, please. And I'll say something about the results from the, yeah, so we had very different types of homes. So we interviewed 16 households, and we could divide them into different types of categories. So if you give me the next slide, I'll tell you how we divided them. The homes differed between knowledge and competence, the incentives that they had, their everyday activities, the physical environment, although it was in a sort of a white middle-class area, the physical environment, the building, were quite different, and also the energy use. So out of these differences, we made what we call personas, or home personas. So we could divide the different households into different home personas. But if you just give me the next slide, I'll say something more about, yeah, this is a summary. I wanted to emphasize these differences. So when we compare the stakeholder views of households and what we actually found in the households, so the needs, what was put forward from the stakeholder views of households was, of course, the specific need of a stable power grid. This was sort of self-evident, and I think it was self-evident for the households because they hardly mentioned it. It was a basic need, and also that the stakeholders put forward the potential source of movable electricity use. That's how they see the households. And automation was a very strong, and automation of households and automation of energy use. But in a bit ironic, awareness was also put forward as a strong need, although if automation comes, awareness is hardly needed. When we asked households about the most important things with the home, this was quite similar results from all the households: safety, security, and control, and also to be able to carry out the everyday activities and to identify themselves with a home. Relationships and continuity was also very important. So can I just say very briefly the last slide of my presentation?
Your sum up.
If it's possible. Yeah, exactly this one. So you might have seen this picture before of Resource Man. This is a persona put forward by Yolanda Strangers, who's a sociologist. And this is a bit of a warning that change is not achieved merely through technology and data, and the social context is crucial. If you design for resource man, who is a persona being very interested in his or her own data and in his or her energy consumption, likes numbers, you risk missing everyday life where energy use is included. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecilia. Very interesting, very interesting input, and we will have a lot of time to discuss later. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And without further ado, and before we jump actually into Mina's input, so Mina, you have to wait a little bit longer. We have another small Slido that we would like to share with you. So you remember maybe which stakeholder group are you or which stakeholder group are you representing. Now, obviously slightly biased, maybe through Cecilia, but not really. Give us maybe some of your thoughts of which stakeholder groups are expected to play a bigger role in the clean energy transition. So from today, but let's say in the future, what do you think, which ones will play a bigger role compared to today? So feel free, scan the QR code. Also for our panelists, I mean, obviously you can also do that if you have a phone at hand, why not? In any case, just feel free to scan and give us some of the insights, because the next session we'll try to tackle a little bit this topic, and we will love to see some inputs or insights from your side. So we see, okay, private people, obviously, yes. Commercial, all right. So there's a little bit of a movement. Feel free to share. I'll give you a few more seconds. So who hasn't maybe participated, feel free, or share your insight through the chat. And while you're doing this, I forgot to say something. At any point in time, feel free to write questions or any feedback into the chat, and we will try to take this with us to a little Q&A session in the end if there is time. So if there is something burning on your tongue, please share it with us and we'll try to bring it up later. Okay, so I don't see too much movement. We have, I would say, answers in all categories more or less, but most people believe, okay, the operators and utilities, so the DSOs and the municipal utilities and the TSOs of today's world believe would be the most important ones, but followed by the commercial pro and consumers and the private ones after that. So very interesting. Thank you for this input. I think very valuable to see that, even though we have a small group that is not really representative, but thanks a lot. And without further ado, I would like to jump to the next input. Yes, and we will hear something on an ongoing survey that tries to characterize stakeholders in the future energy system. And this is part of the Bridge framework, and Minna Kuvalainen will share some insight with that. Minna, the floor is yours, 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Minna Kuivalainen, and happy to be here with you today speaking about the future energy systems and the role of different stakeholders in it. I work in Smart Innovation Norway, which is a sort of research and innovation company focusing on green transition and specifically in topics of energy, for example. I work in the social innovation team, so my focus is on looking at sort of people and human interaction in the energy transition. And today I'm also speaking in the capacity of a member of the leadership team of the Bridge Working Group on consumer and citizen engagement. And the idea is to focus on a survey that we are conducting currently on the characterization of stakeholders in the future energy system. Next slide, please. And one more. Okay, thank you. So the Bridge Working Group on consumer citizen engagement, it has been sort of impulsing the idea of this kind of survey to understand better the role of different stakeholders in current and future energy systems. And there has been this topic group on stakeholder characterization who has been actively working on on this topic and this particular survey with the support from two Horizon or two European Union funded projects, Plason and EdgeFlex. And if we move forward to the next slides, then I can explain a little bit what is the goal of this survey. So the idea is that moving towards the future, the energy system is expected to change quite a lot towards this kind of more flexible system, as was discussed also in the last presentation. And there will be the role of stakeholders in the system might change quite radically. And the idea is to try to gather sort of experiences and understanding how the roles of different stakeholders are being understood and seen in the current system and then towards the future. The aim is to create this kind of openly accessible database to share the results and insights for anybody to be used. And the idea is that the information will help to develop better engagement strategies and better understanding how to engage and incorporate different types of stakeholders when we are working within the energy system. So really, we are targeting both sort of researchers and project partners who are working on research on this topic, and then in general, just anyone who is interested and is interacting with stakeholders while working on different aspects and topics related to the flexible energy system. And we can go to the next slide. So, what is so special about this survey and why am I talking about it today? So the idea in this survey is to do it a little bit. It's not just an average quantitative survey, but it really is about the respondents creating their own sort of stakeholders or personas in the survey through this kind of bucketing system, where you can track and drop different kind of features and attributes related to different types of stakeholders you might know or you might have been working with or have information about. So it's really an idea to try to condense this complex topic into one survey in a bit more interactive way than in general, and in so doing also gather statistical data on how the role of different stakeholders could look like in the energy system. And we can go to the next slide. So this is an ongoing survey. It was opened towards the end of last year, and so far we got around 80 valid responses with over 400 characterizations. It's not 400 different types, but 400 personas characterized as such. The survey is still ongoing, and within these slides there are also links. So this is at the same time also an invitation for anybody who is interested in still taking it and responding it. And we are still looking for opportunities to distribute it more widely. So in the coming slides, I will just give sort of teaser of what kind of information you can expect to be having later on once the survey, the sort of opening period has been completed. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so this stakeholder characterization survey, the aim is to look and understand stakeholders in an energy system in two different levels. So there can be stakeholders characterized as organizations, but the aim is also then to dig deeper into sort of different roles within organizations and different persona types. So far in the left-hand side, there's a sort of list of some of the now most popular personas having been characterized. So there's information about DSOs, the roles of sort of private persons and energy community members, and then different organizations, including DSOs, academic institutions, and so on. The idea is that for each of these persona type, we also collect information about different features related to this. So what kind of tasks they are performing, what kind of drivers they have to sort of function or join the energy system, and what are the barriers for engagement, for example. And this could be used, for example, within projects or within whomever who is working with the energy system to sort of quickly collect information of different relevant stakeholders that you're working with and trying to understand the different futures and sort of motivations and barriers, for example. This could help creating engagement strategies or overall understanding the context where you might be operating at. And we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so in general, the idea was to create these type of stakeholder personas in all around, let's say, valid in a European level in a sense. And then for the futures that I was mentioning, for example, there's an example of the drivers. So if we have here now 5 different information about 5 different personas, but if we follow up the energy community member, for example, we could see that most respondents so far have stated that energy community members are often sort of motivated by the potential to protect the environment, and also at the same time by this kind of monetary benefits and looking for sort of economic incentives to, for example, reduce their energy bills or some business interests, and at the same time maybe possibly also engaging to this kind of more community action. And then for the other personas, the kind of drivers might be slightly different. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So one sort of result or way to look at the results is to look at the different stakeholder personas within the energy system, but then also the survey helps to collect information about the current and potential future roles of these personas. So if we're looking at the diagram here and the results here, like the second 2 columns from the left, we have the private homeowner. So the sort of the respondents have estimated that, okay, in majority of cases, the private homeowners, they are engaged in energy consumption, which is quite logical, but also their role in the future, they would be also moving towards more electricity generation, so sort of becoming small scale producers of energy. And equally, the sort of other columns could be also in the sort of looked and interpreted. Then there are some pieces of information. If we look at the academic institutions that are on the far right, for example, one of the future roles is related that doesn't appear in the current characterizations, is related to sort of becoming more this kind of ICT provider. And the questions might be that why is this the case? So in these kind of cases, the aim with the survey is also not really only on the survey data, but also start conducting this type of in-depth interviews with some of the stakeholders to understand deeper that the certain tendencies and information that is coming up in the survey. And we can move, I think, to the next slide. Okay, so what are the next steps now in this process? So we do have the preliminary results and information, but we are continuing to gathering more data and inputs, both to the survey itself and then also conducting in-depth interviews to understand better some of the trends. The results, they will be used to producing this academic study addressing stakeholder strategies and stakeholder engagement strategies, but then the aim is also to really publish the information in an open access database so that anybody who is interested in using the data for their purposes can access it and can do so, and really hoping that this could somehow also help thinking how to engage better with different types of stakeholders into future energy systems. And if we go to the last slide, as I just said before, the survey is still ongoing, and we are inviting everybody to sort of take it and respond to the questions, and in so being contributing to the project and process.
Thank you very much, Mina, for the interesting insights. So now we have heard the two main inputs of the session, but we have 3 more women in this session that will also be a part of the panel. So we have called it the 99 seconds pitch, where we would start with Claire to give her pitch. It's a very short pitch, as I say, a word about you, and then just show us one picture what you're doing in your work that might be very insightful. And I would say, without further ado, I'll give you the 99 seconds. Not sure if I'll be able to really time it, but I'll try. So I wish you great success.
Thank you, Andreas. Just shout when I reach 90 seconds. Yes, thank you. So my name is Claire. I'm from Denmark TU, and I was the project coordinator for Flexus that just finished in February this year. Very quickly about the project, the whole thing started with the observation that city planners, have become the intermediary, the key stakeholders to, to link between those big energy transition targets taken at the higher level and, physically implementing them in their locality. And this responsibility is particularly marked with the heating sector just because of its intrinsic local nature. And this especially when we have district heating or natural gas network and at the city level. The thing is, we see two things. Very often city planners just lack the resources to deal with all the different data and information when it comes to making insightful heat planning. It's not because they don't want to, but sometimes they just lack time and resources to do something about it. And second, we've seen that especially smaller cities lack this again this resource as compared to big rich urban areas. And we see slowly but surely this kind of two-speed transition taking place at the territory level in the different countries. So if you can go to the slide, please. So what we did in Flexus, we worked hand in hand with the 2 municipalities. They were our need owners. And what we did with them is we tried to find a way to digest with them all the different data that is made available by public registers, by utilities, by a lot of, so all the data that is already available down there at the city level, building types and so on and so forth. And we developed with them several tools that are really specific to those cities, but that could be replicable in many different cases. Can you click, please? Yeah, we developed.
Please wrap it up.
Oh yeah, sure. So we developed a smart energy, data management system to collect the data and process them. We developed 3 different models looking into different aspects of their energy transition. On a more qualitative note, we developed this very first taxonomy that you can see on the right hand of the slide, looking into district heating integration to electricity systems. And very finally, we developed a visualization tool using GIS that helps them to frame what kind of different strategies they could implement at their locality level and taking decisions. So that's what we did, and that's what we delivered, and we're very proud about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, I think we stretched 99 seconds a little bit, but nevertheless, great job. I know it's hard to wrap up a lot of information in a very short period of time. Next one on stage will be Sabine, the mayor of Bad Hildelang.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
You're there. Okay, the floor is yours, and the 99 seconds start right now.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Sabine Rödel. I'm the mayor of Bad Hindelang, which is a little town in the Alps in Germany. We have 5,200 inhabitants, and we really have fluctuating needs of energy due to our touristic influence because of over 1 million overnight stays. And we have a high percentage of preserved nature, and this really makes it not very easy for us to handle this climate change. Nevertheless, we have a long history in cooperative energy industry. Our local energy cooperative was founded 100 years ago, and therefore we really have relative lots of experience in utilizing of renewables, especially water renewables. Our electricity, as we've seen from our municipal energy accounting, is more than 58% from renewables, and our heating is made by local heat with renewables by over 80%. So we are quite far down the path. And from my perspective, the turnaround in energy policy will only be successful if we manage to convince the citizens that the municipals, the political communities, but also the suppliers ensure energy supply so that the consumers are independent really, and then also the financial stability of the energy prices and also the participations in energy decisions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was on the spot 99 seconds. I think you did simulate that before coming in here.
No, it doesn't have a clock.
Even better, even better. Thank you very much, Sabine. And the last but not least in this very specific pitch session is Christina. And I would say, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Starborg, and I work at the Swedish Energy Agency. But today I'm representing the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. We're a partnership that is multilateral and strategic partnership that focuses on research and development and innovation programs throughout Europe, as you see on the map, but also in Canada. We pool national and regional R&DI funding to finance projects that focus on energy transition. So I'm specifically representing we have a number of thematic areas, and I represent number 5, which focuses on integrated regional energy systems. We had a call this last year that was for over 140 million euros, and we will have another call now this fall. So just shortly about the focus area that I work with. We're looking at integrated regional energy systems where the need owners are the ones driving the transition, essentially. So we want to have projects where local and regional energy and climate plans are sort of the foundation, and like local and regional roadmaps are guiding the kind of projects that are in action. We'd like to encourage projects where you build on work that is happening in existing living labs, or maybe demonstration projects that are already in action. And often we have a number of challenges that we think would be very exciting to fund. But for example, enabling a secure, resilient, fossil-free supply from predominantly regional energy sources is something that we're very interested in.
Christina, thank you very much. Okay, so we have heard a lot of different inputs. I think still with the same vision, get more people involved and get the person, the single person, the citizen in the center of attention. So maybe I can kickstart a little discussion now that we're all in the panel with a big question, but maybe we can see how we discuss this. Maybe what do you think would be one thing to do in order to get people involved better in terms of, we heard about strategies, we heard about funding, we heard about things are implemented at home, but certain things need to be checked in order to do that. So maybe I'll look into your direction, Sabine, if that's okay. Can you share a little bit of insights how you succeeded in involving people more? What was the conversation? What's your success story, maybe, just to kickstart it?
I think the success story is still ongoing because we are not at the end. From my perspective, it's what Cecilia has told before. I mean, it's knowledge, data, and incentives, more or less. We should already we have an awful lot of households who are interested in these data, but they really don't know how to get it. And for me, it's a question of tools to visualize, at the one hand, the energy consumption, as well then as the actual energy available from renewables, and then also to have a benchmark. Like if I'm a family and I'm 4 people and I see what I use and also what is available, then I still don't know whether I'm good or bad because I don't know what my neighbor's doing. So we would need tools to have benchmarks. And then also we face quite a bit of problems, especially in our community, because we have existing listed historic buildings, and we also have nature preserve. So all these protected areas, they are not really available for renewables. And so to get the people, you have to find the balance between protecting the nature on the one hand side and also the protected buildings or the historic buildings, but also explain the people why we need the renewables and that we cannot go on like that. And when they understand it, and then also have an incentive by having low cost, and we perhaps manage a real energy sharing, then I think we will be successful. And that's all parts of our way, really.
Thank you very much. I mean, myself, I live in Berlin, and I think 80% of the buildings are 100 years old plus. So putting isolation on the outer walls is a very big challenge. And this is just a little drop on a hot stone that we have to do. So I feel with you. But maybe looking your direction, Claire, you have talked about, let's say, a smart interactive system that would maybe leverage such things. Can you maybe give us a little bit of insights, what kind of experience you had with maybe people interacting and maybe using it or trying it out?
Yes. So actually, it is less of an interactive system and more of a GIS system that we have developed. So clearly, the knowledge gap that we identified with the city planners, with the was precisely what was discussed right earlier by Miss here you are, Sabine. Sorry. So it's less of an integrated smart system, but more GIS, where we can actually see the different districts, and we know in a district what kind of people live in there, because that's something extremely important. Of course, the energy transition is important, but who will pay for it is also very important. And we know that some districts are inhabited by wealthy people, some other by less wealthy people. And what we want to do is also connect all those energy consumption, energy production, transformation with some more socioeconomic indicators, really much target or bring us insights on who will be affected by what and how to prioritize also actions at the city level. So it's more in a long-term planning perspective rather than in a short-term operation perspective that we developed this project. And actually, since you were asking about practical implementation, what our city planners, because these were our need owners in the project, have been doing with the project, that they used the input that we generated to build their own strategic energy plan to the next decades in the future. So that's very nice. Yes.
May I just pass this on to Cecilia at this point, because you're also referring a lot to the change inside buildings where we are closest to people, really. And I do believe, I mean, from my perspective at least, there needs to be a lot of knowledge gained by the individual in order to apply this. Or do you see it, well, we can also leverage certain things in an automated way so the person doesn't need to interact? Because from my learning, at least from now, if you talk about, let's say, electricity, and this is the energy carrier that we need to focus on, at least to a big extent, it was always a no or low involvement product, let's say, that comes out of the wall and you plug it in, and as long as it functions okay, but it doesn't function, there's a big problem. And now we need to try somehow to give this, I don't know, a nice face or a nice story or whatever there needs to be, and people should jump on this ship and say, like, let's sail together onto a better future. So what have you learned about engaging in this, I would say, very complex and very technology high level interaction between people and technology, so to say?
One thing that we've learned is that people are different, and households are different, and that not everybody is interested in their own electricity use. And a lot of people, what we've seen, some people are very, very interested in doing good for the climate. But it's not that self-evident to connect climate impact to energy or electricity consumption. It's quite abstract. It's not like food is more. It's more of a concrete issue. You know, food waste is a very obvious thing that you know that if you waste food, you also do something that will impact the environment. But electricity is not that. It's clean. It doesn't smell, and that sort of thing. So to reinforce that connection, I don't know how, but it's a communication problem, I think. Also the gap between the stakeholders, the energy companies, the municipalities. The municipalities are always closer to the households, of course, so they have an important role to fill. But to get a more nuanced picture of who the households are and what the drivers are, I think it's important in order to sort of decrease the gap between stakeholders and households. And I would like also to point out a change that we've seen over the maybe past 10 years in viewing households. So the households, to get the households involved, it was thought there was a vision of activating households, and there was an expectation that as soon as that households knew about their own electricity and the impact that it had, they would also change. But it's I think we have learned now that that's not always the case. I mean, knowledge doesn't always come with behavioral change. It's not that simple. Sometimes it does. Some people are very interested, and they are very interested in lowering their energy costs, and therefore they find out how to change their behavior. So there's the automatic control comes in and plays a big role. And we've seen that also in our interviews with stakeholders in Sweden, that automation is more of a driving force right now. But there's also warnings, alarm clocks when talking about automation, but because people also need to understand what's happening and how can you override when you have different needs, and what happens when things break, and what happens if the data leaks, and that sort of thing, trust issues, safety issues. So that was a long reply to your short question.
No problems. Two things come to my mind. So the first thing that you mentioned was we need to change, or maybe we need to change in terms of how you perceive the role of households. So we just say we need to empower them, but also give them more leverage in terms of organization. So this overarching topic of energy communities that we keep talking about, but somehow it's still not happening. So we have also a few, I think, examples in the European field, let's say, that do try to do that. And I think there are also some success stories, but we need to push that much harder. So what do you think is the next step to do that? Looking again in your direction a little bit, Cecilia, and then maybe Sabine has also an opinion on that, I believe.
So did I understand your question right about energy communities to take that step?
Yes.
Yeah.
And is that the next, let's say, major thing that we have to do, among other things, obviously, but when it comes to empowering single or small groups of people, let's say, and do you know about success stories that you can share with us? And then maybe Sabine can also throw something in. Yeah.
In Sweden, we don't have any energy communities in the sort of the community sense of the word yet. I have a project on energy communities where we're studying cases where they are actually trying to create energy communities. So I don't have any success stories in Sweden to share with you, but I think that, and from our previous research, we see that when people start to produce their own energy, they also get closer to this sense of being part of the energy system. And I think so. My answer is I think this is a very interesting way to go and promising. I would hope, but I don't have any definite answers yet.
Different type of commitment, I would also argue.
Yeah, sure.
Not just a passive acceptance way of looking at things, but more of a participative and maybe even investing in terms of money or other things.
Yeah,
But
and the emotions, I think I don't think we should underestimate the engagement, because you do something for yourself, and some people compare it with growing your own vegetables, being like self-sufficient, and baking your own bread, making your own electricity.
Thank you. Sabine, maybe would you like to share something from your side?
Yes. We have energy communities. We have a very formalized energy community with 300 members, which was founded 100 years ago, which is more like an investment in a community. Really, you get a dividend. This is very efficient, really, and also very success story, because there's lots of dividend coming out. Although that's, for me, not the typical energy community, because for me, energy community should be a real energy sharing, meaning that what I give in, I can use, and then I have sort of a balance in between. I was thinking whether we have something like that as well, and I found out yes, because we have very old water rights and of little rivers, little rivers where we use the energy since centuries. And these are 4, 5, 6 people who have the ground at this river. And you can see what does that with people, because these 5 people, they are very, very interested in how much water flows, how when you have some wood in the water, which is already taken out because it would take off the efficiency of the energy. And there you can see if it's really a little group, what that does to people. And I think that's the idea we need in the energy communities, much more than this investment idea what we have at the moment, which is very easy to implement, but from my perspective would not change very much in the idea of the person. But these real communities where I have a part in, and where I have a real saying, and where I can do things, that changes really how people use the energy.
Yes, and I think Cecilia mentioned before, it's also a trust-related topic, definitely, because I think you receive your electricity and you receive a bill, and sometimes if you don't have a municipal utility around you that you know the people necessarily, it might be just a corporation that you don't know what kind of face it has. So I think would go also into trust, but maybe, Mina, I'm looking your direction. Can you maybe share a little bit about, if it's about creating trust and in this term also communicate and engagement, with particular groups, what do you think do we need to do in order to strengthen this type of processes or this type of relationship from an energy system perspective, but also stakeholder in general? Can you share a little bit of the bridge insights that you have worked on and still working on?
Okay, so within Bridge, we are working with a network of research projects working actually, yeah, many of them work directly with energy communities and sort of developing them, and others also more maybe focused on households and so on. And I just couldn't agree more with some of the comments that I've heard here also, with the sort of needs of understanding better really the local context and the social context where people are and like trying to build the different strategies of engagement based on really the locality. So there's and local understanding. Trust is certainly one of the issues that has come about when we've sort of analyzed how to build, how to engage, like what is lacking, how to build strategies that we are able to sort of better engage people. And usually it's the sort of potential of the local level actors. Maybe they usually tend to have tend to be maybe more trusted by the people. If we are looking at energy communities, for example, that could be initiated or operated, but these are still topics that many of the projects are also sort of struggling with and looking at how to overcome. Like the awareness raising only is not enough. It's kind of needed, but then how to build more trust, how to fit the interventions so that they really fit the local context. And one of the topics I could maybe raise is also the sort of engagement of people in and the end users in the development of technologies, and really those people who are going to use them already at the development stage to be able to design interventions that respond to the needs of people, instead of just introducing something and hoping that somebody will grasp it. So that's one of the also specific topics that we are looking in the Bridge network also.
Perfect segue for what I wanted to ask anyways, Mina, so thank you very much. So what I also see, and I have also experienced myself, is we develop technologies and try to do all these things on paper, and in the end we forget sometimes this one person that actually should be addressable with that. And what comes to my mind is something like citizen science, this concept where you involve people from the very beginning in development processes of solutions that they might need, but they can sit there, let's call it in a little council or something like this, and just be in feedback loops of what is being done. So maybe, Christina, can you tell us a little bit about, is there something as such in CDP where we want to enforce also the normal people coming into these kind of processes and being part of maybe a very high level technology development, but just understanding it and feeling accepted and understood and heard, rather than we have something technology, we're going to roll out, we're going to install it in your home, and it's going to function, don't worry about it. You can trust us. So is there something that is envisioned also in CTP along those lines?
Yeah, most definitely. The goal that I'm working on, integrated regional energy systems, is definitely a place for that. And we are looking for collaborations and partnerships where the need owners are defining the project problems and the most important issues that they want to work together on. We're also interested in working with as many stakeholders locally as possible to drive that transition. So other things that we think are important are, for example, policy aspects, that these people are involved in putting together, co-creating the policy and governing documents that'll help to move the transitions forward. So this can be from private citizens, but also other stakeholder groups that will be actively involved in making the changes that need to happen on the regional and local level. So these kind of projects are definitely interesting to us. But from our perspective, it's very exciting if they can work in these sort of transnational contexts where they inspire each other with, you have other countries and other regions with similar or complementary challenges, essentially, and see how can we make this interpretable? How can we scale so that so many regions as possible can benefit for the kind of the transitions that are happening locally? So that is something that we really would like to work with. How do we coordinate research and innovation activities on a European and international level?
Thank you, Christina. So when you say that, it comes to my mind that Sabine should talk to Cecilia about implementing communities in Sweden and vice versa, just to learn from each other. So I think there would be a very nice role model concept in terms of people come together because they have the same interests and they might share the experience with each other. But maybe another thing that comes to my mind, because often when we speak about solutions, you also talk about, yes, behavioral change and people need to, have the right mindset and things like this. And then often we also say there are digital technologies that can help us, digital tools, digital maybe interaction systems that can be leveraged. So maybe openly ask, because I think you all had here or there a certain amount of experience with that. What do you think needs to be done in order to people would use it? And this will not solve the problem, but how much can it assist the unique person or community in terms of getting there where they want? An example could be a system that manages all the grid-related things for a community. So you don't have to have an expert who sits there and, pushes the button and does all these things. So maybe the community can be organized. But again, you need to be familiar with it. You need to learn about it and you need to leverage it. So I'm just openly asking, everyone can speak up if you can share something along these lines. So the floor is yours, whoever wants to speak up first. Who dares? Nobody?
Okay, maybe I can say a little something here, yeah. That's a bit unrelated to the project I presented, but I also work on a big European project looking into digitalization on the energy system, different levels. And I really liked one of the presentations showing the different motivations for digital investments. We just completed a big survey among 21 persons working at DSOs, trying to figure out what are they not going digital. And basically what they're telling us is that, well, sometimes there is just no need to go digital. There are other means of reaching some targets that are as good. So maybe we should also remember that we don't want to develop a wide bunch of technologies everywhere for the sake of developing it, but actually understanding where it makes sense to develop it. And probably in some communities it will make a lot of sense, and maybe in others it would make more sense to enforce more energy efficiency, and you don't need to be very smart to do this. So where do we actually need it, and how is the benefit of it distributed? And yes, and how do we deal also with the other bunch of issues that this may bring, thinking of cybersecurity issues, data privacy issues, and those different things. So maybe that's not exactly what you wanted to hear, but that's also a side of the story that is important, I think, that we bear in mind.
I might comment on that directly. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because often people talk about digitalization as a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you do it, it's going to do certain things. So then it becomes why you do it just for the sake of it. And the second thing is, I'm also evaluating a lot of projects during my time, and I have seen a lot of digital projects that never raise the question of how much does this digitalization cost, and is it an efficiency gain or not? And I think, I think also, Christina, in your direction, maybe it should be also a thing for, I don't know, future calls to say, okay, if you digitalize something, you at least needs to give us some type of estimation if this really helps or not. And I have seen this very, very rarely, that someone has questioned their own work in digitalizing something very strongly and say, okay, here are the possibilities, but it's a big question mark because it leverages a lot of resources to do that, or it's going to take a very long time to roll this out and educate people about it. So I think we should really critically look at it, because I like the digitalization aspect of it, but we cannot just solve everything with that. It can just be a tool to help us, and even sometimes not applicable at that. Cecilia, you maybe want to jump in?
I just want to say that I agree. I agree totally with Claire and what you also just said. And I would like to add that the climate impact of producing a lot of technology that also needs to be looked into. What is the impact, and is there an actual saving of efficiency if you count the consumption, the embodied consumption, and also the social aspects of getting the material for all the technology that you develop.
Especially in times like those today. I believe that
Yes.
resilience and certain value chains that are related to resources are very important to look at. So, and I know that in CTP in general, there is also a big how can I say, process ongoing that these topics are important and need to be leveraged in a certain way, especially from a scientific way, because this is what we can do. Anything else that you want to comment on? Yes, Mina, please.
Just maybe depending on the type of digitalization, but also bringing into the discussion on the sort of digital skills and capacity of different people to actually use and take advantage of the digital technologies. I mean, of course, many things can be automated and so on, but then if we are looking at people that many are still kind of lacking the maybe sufficient skills to jump into this development, and there is the social sort of danger of kind of leaving some people also out of this kind of digital and green transition through these technologies if we don't think it really well how to do it.
You're muted, Andres.
Oh, sorry. So I have another, thank you, Mina, for the input. I have another question that I would openly ask to all of you, and maybe someone has a good idea for that. We have seen in this stakeholder characterization that we have personas, we have now household personas, according to Cecilia, we have personas now that can be, I don't know, house owners, but they can be any type of person in a company or any type of organization. And what we also see sometimes is that even in our life, in our everyday life, you also represent different personas at different times. So you can maybe work in an organization and do certain things, and you go home and maybe you have a different view on how you do things over there. So very open, but I know it's very hard. I'm not sure if there's any information on that, but how can we deal with this change? I mean, we can assume that everybody who has an idea of how things could be, they cannot take this idea to work because not everybody has the luxury to do exactly what they envision to do. I understand that, but maybe on the other side, there can be an influx of where you are, you can still bring ideas in no matter what you do. So do you think we should also tackle this type of, how can I say, meta level of people actually living their lives? You have maybe one life that you're at home, you do certain things the way that you want them, but the other part of your life, maybe you spend it at a place where you work and do other things. So is there some, ways to tackle this different type of role that we sometimes take, maybe even unwillingly, but in the end, we are working towards one goal? And I think it goes more into behavioral science, so it's maybe not directly, but we have the best expertise field here. But do you think maybe Sabine, a practical thing that you're tackling every day? I could imagine. So you have a finite amount of people that you need to organize somehow from an energy perspective, and then there are homeowners who have a certain vision of how to do it. But you also have a lot of people working, for example, in the administrative part of the town or a city. So how can we leverage those people in the administration, or are they as motivated, let's say, as the homeowners who are very forward thinking? It's like, I do everything smart here, I'm a presumer, I'm going to put my PV system to work, and then it's going to help the community and something like this. So maybe just from this is a good practical focal point to focus. Can you share a little bit in this regard, maybe?
I think that's not so much a question of energy, but a question of values, because people in different roles behave according to their values if they can, and if they are supported. And if you are in an organization which does not support the values, it doesn't help. And also, if you don't have the values, you can do as an organization whatever you want. They will not intrinsically do that. And so I think you will always face this lack of this different role model. And I think you must accept people. You have to be transparent with what you do. And if you convince them, then they will behave accordingly at home as well as in the office or in the organizations. And if you're not convincing, and if you're not transparent, and you are not able to tell them why, and they don't share your values, then they will not.
I agree. And I think a lot of this comes down to listening, not just speaking about it. And I've learned this because we have done some research on younger adults or juveniles, showing them big problem of energy and climate change and whatnot. And we have learned that regardless of the social background, if you're willing to listen to them and give them a lot of opportunities to interact and learn from you and you also from them, then they also feel accepted and heard. And if you can reach, I think, this type of state, then at least the possibility of people wanting or being able to interact and maybe even be motivated to do more than just, you know, the minimum, bare minimum, then maybe we can get somewhere. Do we have any other things? Yes, Christina, please.
Yeah, I just want to agree, and I think that the municipalities and regions have a key role to play in sort of being a platform or a forum for different stakeholders to be actually heard and engaged. So, because I think once you have that platform and a common like vision or goal, it's much easier to feel motivated and maybe take action. So I think that establishing those kind of forums is really critical.
And if I'm not mistaken, in Bad Hildelang, there is actually a physical place where people from the community can meet and talk about the things, if I'm not mistaken, but please, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Sabine.
No, I think in Hindelang, we try to have this platform physically by people inviting them. We have an energy team doing that for energy issues, but we also have that as a area of life concept, really, as we told in 2030, which is much bigger, and not only for energy, but how do you want to live in 10 years according to tourism, according to nature, according to buildings. What do you really want? And we've asked all our inhabitants, as well as our tourists, as well as our companies, and said, please investigate some time and help us to find the right way of living together, really, and accepting the other, being tolerant to the other, but also going forward. And that's also the same thing now with photovoltaic on open space photovoltaic. We are starting now the process of discussing that with the energy team, within the councils, but also then at the end of the day, also with the people, because I mean, we cannot just say we think renewables are the best what we can do, so take every mountain and put the photovoltaic on it. If people do not accept this, you will not become successful with it. They will just not help you. And if you start small and you discuss with them and you say, okay, this area might be possible, what do you think about it? And when people see, okay, you're careful with all these ideas, then they will support you. And that's really what I hope, that we go down this path a bit further.
I understand we have to come visit Bad Hildelang as far as I can listen to you and hear all these great things. So thank you very much for the input. I think it's very important to jump from the scientific part sometimes into the, you know, real world, what happens in front of you, and see that there are in fact very good examples that we can leverage and learn from. So thank you very much. So before we, if no one else has anything to say, if yes, please speak up or raise your hand. I will do a last little poll to ask the audience. You can also maybe interact if you like. Obviously, it's always nice that the panel interacts. But I would like to ask a last question before we log out, so to say. And the question is, what is the major incentive to engage citizens and consumers in the energy transition? So we have learned a lot. A lot of has been discussed. A lot of points have been brought up. So feel free to scan the code. There's going to be also, I think it's still in the chat, the link. It's always the same link. So just use that. and just hit us with your twittering. And let's see what we still believe. And panelists also invited, obviously, to is anonymous. No one will know who it was, so no worries. But it's interesting to see, I think, after a longer discussion, what they believe. Money seems to be on topic, understandable. All right, maybe another 30 seconds for those who have not participated yet. So we see a bigger variety of topics now: participation, awareness, acceptance. We have talked about using transparency. We have also tackled this a little bit, at least. The costs, obviously, and money in general. Anything else that comes to someone's mind? Otherwise, very good. Funding. All right, very nice. So the picture is slowly drawn. Transparency is now a little bit bigger. Very nice. Okay, then trying to wrap it up. Thank you very much for this very lively and fruitful discussion, especially to the panelists with the great inputs and the good discussion. So thank you very much for all these different types of perspectives and insights. We'll be very happy to collaborate more in the future and see what you're doing, because super interesting topics. We will share the information that we have gathered with you, and also the survey link. Again, conduct it if you can. It will help everybody to understand each other a little bit better, I think. And other than that, if we have concluded now our slide set, I would say enjoy your afternoon. Thanks for the attention and the participation. And yeah, have a great further start into the week, and hope to see you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.